All right, guys, it looks like we're now live. It is Tuesday night. It's about 7 o'clock, and it's time for another episode of Conversations with Commodores. And I've got a teammate on tonight, somebody we have just spoken with for the first time in over 30 years. He was a kicking specialist out of San Diego. He's got a fun story to share. Charles Chaz Bolton, how you doing tonight, Chaz? And thank you for making some time for us.
Thank you, Bernard. So happy to be here and talk to everybody and catch up. So thank you for having me and doing this forum.
Well, the beautiful thing about this show and about our Facebook group is it's allowing teammates to reconnect after the decades have passed so quickly. And gosh, when you sent that one picture from Neyland Stadium in December of '89, my last game, and I'm in the background of that photo, I'm like, wow, that brought me back to some real memory. So thank you for sharing that photo. That was a doozy. I was glad to see that.
Coach Brown, his flight jacket, yeah, and then Rob there, barefoot kicking next to me. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Well, Chaz, let's start with the current what's going on with you. I know you're in Indianapolis. You've got a busy household full of athletes and kids. So just kind of catch up, folks, what's going on with you currently.
Yeah, been here about 20 years. My wife, Taryn, who's actually a Vandy alum, class of 99, we met in San Diego before we came here. Been here about 20 years in technology sales with Dell Technologies, last about 8 years. So I cover Indiana, all kinds of markets and verticals selling Dell Technologies. I have three kids. My oldest is going to be 18 in January, looking at college right now, looking to be a Bulldog, Mississippi State Bulldog possibly. My daughter is a ninth grader, Ashley, oldest Alex, daughter Ashley, ninth grader at the same high school, Pike High School. And then my youngest, Andrew, so triple A's, is a fifth grader in the system here too. So as I told you before we went on, I'm actually, if Corey's around, it's next to Ben Davis. So Corey Harris, I'm just north of you at Pike High School, Pike Township. So and I never thought of Indianapolis when we were together in college. What's Indy? But
Right.
made it here 20 years later. So love being here. It's a great place to raise a family and just a good big town, basically.
Well, good deal. So you've got double doors in the house.
Yes.
Any of the kids expressed any interest? I know the other two are younger. Any interest in making their way to Nashville to campus?
My daughter, maybe she's the smart one. So don't tell my oldest. He's looking at Mississippi State and local for Indiana, but they've been to games. We've been down there. My wife and I visited years ago. So we first connected because of the Vandy thing, because we're in San Diego and it's like at a party, hey, you went to Vandy? So did I. And that's kind of how we connected. So, and then married, and here we are.
Well, that's so cool. Guys, one of the things, and we're going to get into Chaz and us being teammates back in the day, but one of the things that I always appreciated and loved about your game was, and this is with every kicker I've ever known, held for, or been around, is they have a different way of viewing the sport than anybody else on the team, and they have a different mindset because you have one job. Your job is to kick the ball where it needs to be kicked. And Chaz had a great assignment. I don't know if he appreciated it then or appreciates it now. His job was to make sure that the return to kick returners were all warmed up, whether it was in practice, whether it was in the pregame. And it's not as easy as you guys think. He's got to put it at a certain distance, a certain height, and he's got to get it there. So here's where I'm going with this, Chaz. When did you know, or when did you develop the ability to kick a ball a far distance? Did you play soccer as a kid? Was it just natural? Did share us a little bit about the origin of your athleticism?
I mean, from a kicking standpoint, as a little kid, first living in Florida, I used to go to Dolphin games and just love to see the kickers. I loved, in a tribute to Rob Chura again, the one bar helmet. I'm a 5-year-old kid. That's a cool helmet.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
kind of got in that way and just love the repetitiveness, the feel of kicking a ball. And I did it all my life, Bernard. And, I did other sports. I did basketball, baseball, tennis, a little bit of golf, but I always went back to loving, kicking the ball and even punting. Like I saw we had Jim Arnold on a while back and turning the ball over. So developing that. But I'd love to do it now. I'd give my kids to have a chance to play in the NFL, you know. I just love doing it. I wish I could still do it now at 55.
When was the last time you punted the ball or kicked off or did anything like that? And how are those hamstrings?
They're good. It's for my golf game now. That's where I've evolved to. So
Mhm.
it's a lot like football. You got one shot, kicking it, hitting it right. So after I graduated, I didn't play much at Vandy, and I'll go in that story real quick about when we get to that about my lack of playing days. But
Mhm.
I did try out for the World League, which you
Mhm.
remember that, and I
Oh
actually saw
yeah.
Dante
Yeah.
Ferguson at that tryout
Oh, nice.
back in the day. You know,
Dante.
50 kickers, you got to just be like Jim Arnold out there, or the guy for Alabama, Robbie, whoever it was, that was a
Mhm.
could kill it. Okay, didn't make it. So went back to San Diego. I coached high school, doing all the sports. What am I going to do? Maybe go to grad school. But I still had the itch to try to kick in NFL. Wrote
Mhm.
letters back then, in the early 90s for tryouts and all.
Mhm.
LA Raiders in El Segundo, their practice facility said, "Hey, come up for a tryout. You and a few other guys. We need to have a kickoff guy, punter guy. Just be in camp because we've got Chris Barr, who's an NFL All Star. We've
Mhm.
got Jeff Gossett, who's an All Pro as well. We need to find a leg." So in '93 in May, I went up there to their tryout facility, got to do kickoffs, which I could do directional, and then punting as well. I worked on my punting, right? Shank two punts, you're done. So
Mhm.
that was it, probably. So 93 is the last time I kicked a football. I hung the cleats up and went from there.
Well, at least you got that tryout, which is 99% of us never even get an invitation or a chance to show our abilities. Um, how did you get, you said you started out in South Florida, but how did you get over to San Diego? What age and what brought the family out west?
My mom and dad got divorced. My
Hmm.
mom and my stepfather moved to San Diego for the doctor's practice. My stepfather was a doctor, so we kind of jumped ship out there, my brother and I. So after sixth grade, I moved out to San Diego, started a parochial small school
Hmm.
in San Diego in La Jolla, which is a great area. Mom still lives there, and that's where I stayed through high school, so seventh to 12th grade, and they started a football team in the eighth grade. So it finally got going because it was a girls' school that became a co-ed school. So boys were coming in, Bernard. So we had eight-man football when I played
Huh.
kick there. So 80-yard
Wow.
field.
Well, I've heard of eight-man football in other states, but I've never known anybody who's played it out in California. But I bet that was a good, fun experience. You probably got to play all the positions you could handle.
I just kicked.
Oh, is that right? Well, at least you found your passion. Everybody has their strengths, but was it you graduated out of San Diego, but what ultimately led you to come back to our part of the country, to not really the deep South per se, but a sleepy town at the time, Nashville? How did you end up there and not, for example, staying on the West Coast or somewhere else?
My father lived in Florida and Virginia. You mentioned earlier Alabama roots with UAB, or sorry, U of A,
Hmm.
Alabama. Well, my family are all Florida Gators. My brother's a Gator,
Hmm.
cousins, everybody's Florida Gators. So I still would go summers and live in the Southeast. And I got
Okay.
to kick at Florida Field as a kid for fun,
Oh,
Neyland
nice.
Stadium as a kid, and travel around. So the SEC was always my draw. And I wanted to play football in the South.
Hmm.
Florida was a choice for me. Virginia Tech was actually in the picture. Once I walked on campus in April of '87 and saw the campus, I'm like, this is it. I want to come here. The academics, it's the SEC, great campus, not too big like a Florida, not too
Right.
small like maybe Belmont or something, right? So it just fit and I just felt good. I can think about walking the campus now and remembering that decision and loving it. Went and met Beverly Brothers and June Jakes
Hmm.
in the
That's
offices, talked to some of the coaches. Okay, I want to come walk on, and
right.
sure, whoever you are, we'll give you a look.
Right, right. Well, visiting the campus in the spring, I think is just the ideal time for a prospective student to come there because it's just so gorgeous. I'm sure you walked through the campus and through the middle and saw Rand and Surratt in that area, and maybe the sports facilities is. as meager as they were back then, I'm sure that made an impression on you. Did you get to meet with Watson when you visited in that spring? Do you remember?
I remember Van Holloway.
Yeah, he was the recruiting coordinator at the
Yeah.
time.
So it's like, come walk on. Thinking 87, right? Johnny Clark there. And I love Johnny, such a great friend and mentor for me. Tim Richardson was punting.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
then,
Tim was a quarterback and punter. That's right.
yeah. So I remember going to camp and just trying out and kind of becoming the red shirt. I was red shirt, but being the backup to Johnny. And,
Yeah. And
so no,
one
I really,
setting,
you know,
I can't remember what year, he's no longer with us, but David Lawrence was either that same year or the next year. Do you remember if he was your class or not?
so he and Jeff Owen and
Hmm.
Rob were the year after. So
Okay.
there was a Sam Smart who was a walk-on kicker was around with me, a Stuart Daniel, putting some names way out there. I was
Oh
sort
my
of
gosh, those are names I hadn't thought about in a long
the kickers,
time.
right? A bunch of, and I remember in '88 going to training camp, and there must have been 20 plus the recruits. So it was like
Right.
a fight, and then it narrowed down to the years I was there. It was the four of us with David
Mhm.
and Jeff and Rob and I kind of hanging out. And I
Mhm.
always felt like, they were the recruited players, they were the scholarships. I'm fighting to do something. Got a little bit of playing time here and there, but I was always like I was pushing them and at least be a person to kind of, be a part of it. Yet
Mhm.
I'm still not quite, because if you're backup kicker, that's not exactly in the front lines. So
It's not, but it does serve as an important role, as we mentioned earlier, about warming up the returners, but you're also keeping the kickers who may be on the depth chart ahead of you on their toes. That's a bad pun, but keeping them, sharp. But Jeff was on a few months back, and he talks about his experience, including getting to play a little bit of wide receiver. I don't know if you remember that, but
oh
he
yeah,
was so quick, very small for that position, but very quick, and we needed him at the time. That's for sure.
yeah, oh
Well,
yeah.
Chaz, you come to campus that next, I guess it was the fall of '87. And what was your first impressions? Where did you live? Who was your roommate? That kind of things.
So Lupton seventh floor Lupton. Initially, as the walk-ons, guys like Andy DeWitt, Aristotle Kirkland,
Mhm.
we were kind of in the lounge area. And
Aristotle and I grew up together, same high school.
Dothan, right?
That's right, Northview High School. That's right.
Hairstyle, yeah, wow. So I started there in training camp. That's where we stayed. You guys, or the other freshmen, had their set places. Eventually, a guy named Mike Collette, who was a walk-on basketball player, and I were roommates my freshman year
Mhm.
in Lupton. And I mean, I had a 1.9 my first semester. I
Probably
went
a lot,
like,
probably a lot of us had a 1.9 first semester.
and Dad's like, "What are you doing, Chaz?" I'm like, "Well, this football is just so awesome. Just being in this experience. It was drinking from a fire hose and coming from little 8-man football to the SEC. Oh my goodness, all the stuff we do. I got to travel as the backup and be a fly on the wall with all we went through, Bernard. And it was just took me in. So I'm like, oh, I got to settle down a little bit here after my first semester.
Well, I was going to ask you some of your first impressions getting out there and, going from 8-man league and into the best conference in the country. And you've got you've got returners and players who are just absolute burners on our team. And you've got kicking specialists from other parts of the country who are on the roster ahead of you. Was it kind of a wide-eyed moment, or were you able to kind of absorb it? Because you said, I think you mentioned drinking from a fire hose. I use that all the time. Um, I guess the question would be is give us some of those first impressions.
Well, talk football. Before this call, I thought about you. I can still remember playing Georgia at home our freshman year and a night game, and Tom Gray would hold.
Mhm.
John Shorty was the punt snapper.
Mhm.
Small. You had a field goal only snapper. It was such a specialist with the backup lineman. There was
Hubert,
was
Hubert.
before Hubert. It was before Hubert even.
Oh,
I
I'll
can't
have to
remember
run some.
now.
Yeah,
But so they would do their thing. I'd come in. I think you were backing up Tom Gray that
yeah,
year,
I was.
and we had the tee still. So I'm out there kicking 40 yarders. I'm like, oh, there's Johnny talking to John Casey, Casey, the All-American high school. And I'm like, I think I hit a few good ones. I probably flubbed a few, and it's like, wow. And that was in warm-ups. And of course, I go to my sideline and just take it in as a fan after that. But I never forget that the
We,
cold sort of open stadium and like, okay, there's a lot going on here,
this
So
isn't TV, this is real life.
this is real life.
And the transition that we did away from the tee later on made, I mean, we're about to get into the weeds, guys, but I got to bring this up with Chaz. I did not like the switch away from the tee because I had a spot, I knew where to put the ball, and it was a designated spot. It took a while working with the different kickers to kind of, from in my mind, to recalibrate what I needed, where I needed, how I needed to hold it. So from a kicking standpoint, it had to have been even worse for y'all because you had less height to deal with, I guess. Kind of share that transition away from the tee to the ground.
Yeah, and to be honest, I kicked some high school off the ground field goals
Hmm.
for fun. So I always kind of looked because I looked at the NFL eventually. Even
Hmm.
back then, I was pie in the sky about it, Bernard. But I didn't feel that bad, but I was never accurate enough. So I kind of quickly pivoted after that first year with David there as a punter, with Jeff there and Rob Chura. Okay, where can I fit in? And
Hmm.
the kickoffs was something I was always pushing. I
Hmm.
did get to play in the Duke game,
Hmm.
which I can talk about because it shaped my life, and I'll mention that in a minute. But I've always felt like my strength was my long distance. It's like my golf game. Now I can hit the ball 300 at times, but how is the short game? And I just
Right.
never got the
Right.
feel of not. I could screw around for fun and do it. We go over as kickers by ourselves during practice. Where you guys going? We go kick, and I hit 55 yarders,
Hmm.
by myself. But with the snap, the hold, the timing, I never picked that up enough for the college level. So I
Hmm.
got more of a kickoff hunting kind of direction for me.
Well, I think it's the rare kicking specialist who does it all. I think that maybe sometimes they may have to just because there's no one else, but you become a specialist for a reason, and then you become very good at one particular or two particular things. But getting away from football, how was life for you that first year or two academically? When did you find your footing? What about socially? I mean, were there any kids from Southern California who you knew when you got to campus or later on?
No, I mean that part when I met from Louis,
Hmm.
Louis
Woolridge.
came,
Hmm.
Royce Risser. There's a walk on Trevor Roger came in '88 that was from San Diego from another high school. I got to know him a little bit. Scott Walker, not Scott Walker.
Todd Walker.
He was there. Trevor he was there and he left after a year or two. He's another San Diego kid.
Hmm.
Because Scott Walker and Charles Taylor were guys that came in Northern California, friends of mine that I got. So those were California guys I got to know. But to go back to my starting, it was I had some friends that weren't football players because of the Lupton thing with some of my roommates. Guy played golf there. I got to know my Mike Collette, basketball player roommate. I think in my world, and it went for the 4 years, I kind of floated around. I never as a kicker, I had Mark Mikesell as a next door neighbor, but I would go hang with Scott
Hmm.
and Charles or go William Brown. Derek Payne was next door to me. My last 2.5 years. Rob Roselli was a roommate,
Hmm.
the Jersey guy, Coast Guard transfer. We were roommates my second year. So I kind of, if you say about like best friends, it was more like groups of friends I kind of would aggregate with the team, and everybody was a friend. I just love being in the dorms and being around the scene with football. Outside of that, a few friends here and there that I play golf with here and there, go off to some place or hang out. I wasn't a fraternity guy, anything like that.
Well,
So
I was going to ask you, your experience being a kicking specialist, I think may have been a little bit different than the other guys on the team. In the standpoint was and I'm not belittling, I'm just observing, it may not have been as intense a experience. And maybe I'm reading it wrong, but did you ever get to the point where it was overwhelming, it was too much, you needed to get away from football, you needed to just be a regular student? Did it ever get to that point for you?
So it may have been like I didn't, I was a red shirt and I graduated as a junior, right? So I had 1 more year of eligibility after I had graduated college. I could have stayed for half a year, right? Do 1 more season. But I think as I got to be a senior academically, that last year, I felt like there was one day I actually quit the team. I can't remember midweek, maybe just getting mad about not really going anywhere. I've been, 3 years at it, 2 or 3 years, maybe it was a junior year. So I didn't go to practice. Maybe it was a Tuesday practice or something.
Mm-hmm.
And what sticks with me is the next day is Coach Brown's like, Charles, where were you yesterday? I
Mm-hmm.
came back. He's like, where were you? Oh, I had to study or some other school thing. Oh, okay. So he noticed I wasn't there, and that kind of made an impression that, like
Mm-hmm.
you said, here's a guy with his role. Coach Schmidt's down there with the return guys. Let's go, Charles. Let's get the work in. And then, so yeah, for one day, I kind of said, I'm done with this.
I think that even those players who see the field a lot and play a lot can get to that point. And there are many guys who shared their stories on the show that, you're 18, you're 19, you're 20, and you feel like you've got all the weight of the world on your shoulders because you're playing and you've got to produce on the field, you got to produce off the field because you're just getting pulled in all those directions. But that's also part of the D1 college athlete experience. And that's why, just as a side note, so many kids, and this may be your kids or your experience, everybody wants to go D1 until they realize one, the commitment that it takes, and two, there are so many more opportunities at the Division 2 and Division 3 levels, but a lot of kids don't see it as prestigious or not as they can't brag as much. But aside from that, just being a college athlete, and that if you remember, this is before the NCAA time restrictions were put into place.
Oh, yeah.
For which year it was, maybe in 88, 89. It was one of my latter years that they imposed this 20-hour a week rule. I don't, do you remember that at
I
all?
think it was after me because I remember Sunday mornings going to work out remember the Sunday morning
Oh yeah.
workouts?
Oh yeah.
You guys go watch film in the afternoon. I go back and watch NFL games or something. So
Right.
Sundays were full,
Right.
Bernard.
But I guess my point being is you getting to that, I'm not going to say a breaking point, but a point where you needed to just step away for a day. I think most college athletes, regardless of sport, can get to that pretty quickly. But I want you to take us to the Duke game and why that was so instrumental. What year was that and why was that important to you?
So 1988, maybe 2 or 3 games in, I had a great week of just crushing the ball. I'm a walk on,
Hmm.
right? Coach Brown says, Charles, you're gonna kick off the Duke game.
Hmm.
Night game, Steve Spurrier's last year there, Anthony Delwig,
Hmm.
great receiver, right? Gonna be a high scoring game. Eric EJ's
Yeah,
high
that
kid.
receiver was from the same high school as John Newman from Bowles. Clarkston Hines was his name.
And Chipper
Oh,
Jones, baseball.
oh yeah, oh yeah,
We'll get to baseball later.
yeah.
So it's a night game. It's cold, rainy October, Bernie. You're there. It's 7 o'clock start. So that old AstroTurf, slippery as all can be. The white lines where the paint is slippery as all can be. So with that understanding, I'm going to kick towards the open end.
Hmm.
Back then, wind's behind me. I'm ready, right? Let's go, guys. I'm kicking this ball through the uprights.
Hmm.
Jog up to kick it. I slip. Knuckleball 10 to 10-yard line. Whoa, what's going on here? I jog off the field. I think Coach Brown's got this sort of like, oh.
Hmm.
Game goes on. I kick off again into the wind. It's kind of like that chip shot feel. I want to make sure that I don't slip. So I kind of jog up and hit a high to the 20-yard line. Okay, phew, I didn't slip, but it was a bad kickoff. That's not
Hmm.
a SEC kickoff, right? Okay, but I didn't slip. Later in the game with the wind again, hey, I'm confident. I didn't slip.
Hmm.
Same thing, go and slip again. Coach Brown's like, oh, this is it, awful. I'm going to bury my head. 40,000 fans or close to that, right? To top it off, Johnny misses the game-winning field goal.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
remember this after the game. He and I walk over to that Wendy's right next door, and we just sit there and have some food and take it in. I'm like, I didn't play again that year. I may have kicked off a little bit after that, but basically I was done in the coach's eyes about the confidence. And yeah, I didn't play again that year.
Well, we all have those moments as athletes that are pivotal. We come into our sport, we have a quiet confidence or a confidence about our abilities. We're going to perform the way we expect, the way others may expect, and we're going to beat the guy on the other side. And when that doesn't happen, it chips away at our confidence. And I understand that. It's just like a quarterback going in and throwing a bunch of interceptions or throwing the ball into the stands or hitting Lord knows, hitting somebody in the back of the helmet or whatever. It chips away at that confidence. Did you find your confidence again in practices after that? Or had you gotten to the point where it was just compounding from a confidence standpoint or lack of confidence standpoint?
I'm too stubborn. No, I kept battling, kept working. I got better as a kicker. No, and the long term thinking back is in my current, in my employment, my role, my life after that. That game has had a huge impact because of what I've done the last 30 years. I'll
Mm-hmm.
say that.
Well, that's we're going to pivot to that in just a second. I
Yeah.
kind of thought that's where you were headed, but I want to stick with Vanderbilt for just a few more minutes. I want to talk about you toward your senior year and graduating and those kind of things. Did you find let's say your senior year or from that Duke game on, did you have as was it not as much fun? Were you still enjoying it? Was it a burden? Did you feel like you needed to stay through it until you graduated? What was the approach mentally? Maybe conversations with your dad or whomever about sticking with the sport that you had started as a freshman.
I never wavered because of the life of a Vanderbilt football player.
Mhm.
And for me, Bernie, it's like, moments outside the game as we all as teammates, it's little things like Coach Bates had the dunk contest for us to do. I love doing that. Or, I remember pushing with other linemen pushing a Volkswagen up the parking
St.
garage in the
St.
city.
Valentine's Day Massacre.
There you go.
Yep.
Um, Fat boys. So intramural basketball was Bobby Craycraft at point guard, Kentucky guy, right? Can hold the ball
Yeah.
at 280 pounds.
Yeah.
Pat Akos, great athlete, tight end.
Yeah.
John Dooling became long snapper. I think
Mhm.
Kevin Dowling,
Mhm.
Steve Meads, great athlete, and myself, we're the fat boys. We're the basketball team for intramural. I mean, I love that. I get out and run like like, give me the ball, let's go. And so just the life outside of the game. That's what I love about Vanderbilt football and where it was is the family we had and the
Mhm.
experiences because I didn't have a lot of highlights in that stadium behind you, but I had it around the experience of being there, which I loved and still do.
Chaz, to a man who's been on this show, I can't tell you a one who have said to the contrary, that their on-field experiences overshadowed their off-field friendships and camaraderie and just hanging with the guys, whether it's in Towers, whether it's at Jonesy's or wherever it was, going on spring break trips, getting in trouble downtown. I could go on and on and on. But that, what you just described, seems to be the paramount experience for guys who've been on the show when they reflect back, what's the most meaningful part of your Vanderbilt experience? And it sounds like that made a big impression on you, those kind of memories.
Oh yeah, the friends, just the activities. I mean, and yeah, again, being almost like a fly on the wall at times because you're the backup kicker. I'm kind of floating around, seeing stuff and scouting and seeing what's going on. So it definitely impression on me for my rest of my life for sure.
And as you're getting into your senior year and now you're getting closer to graduation, Had you formed a plan at this point, or did you know what was next in your world? And before you say what your answer, I'm going to give you a paraphrased quote that may resonate with you. We're going to have to recreate in the aggregate Jason Giambi.
Okay.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, Moneyball. Saw it a few nights ago with my son just to watch it again.
Oh, it's such a great show. But I'm jumping ahead. Share a little bit about your post Vanderbilt plans and what took place for you.
I was going to kick in NFL.
Hmm.
But once I got past that, which I talked a little bit about early, so I really wanted to get into coaching, sports, football, basketball, baseball. I remember writing Coach Brown about being a GA when he was at Mississippi State, looking at that, go to grad school. So I ended up going back to my high school, working part-time, odd jobs, but coaching assistant in football, basketball, baseball,
Hmm.
trying to live the dream of kicking, maybe working out. Gave it a couple years, Bernie. Finally, UCLA, honed on UCLA to go as a grad assistant
Hmm.
to be, and I studied the game, right? My best friend, who was a Georgetown wide receiver, he would for fun write the Mel Kiper books back in the day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he
Wow.
did that. Oh, sorry. And we got to the Chargers. So kind of going this, the Chargers. I worked for the Chargers for a couple summers.
Hmm.
Brad Bates knew the strength coach John Dunn out in San Diego. Says, Chaz, when you're home from college, go. We'll have you go work out with the guys. Maybe be around, see what it's like. So I got to go in San Diego my junior year, football junior year, and then after I
Hmm.
graduated, it got to be a sort of a assistant training camp guy and be around those guys. Got to meet Bobby Beathard. And I said my friend gave him a book one year and said, "Here's the book. Use this to do your draft." Right. So I
Huh.
always kind of studied the game and was
Yeah.
around the techniques of scouting
Hmm.
like that. So once I looked at UCLA for business school, I talked to Coach Rick Neuheisel, who's offensive assistant. He said, "Chaz, you and a couple of guys were looking as a GA. We'll let you know."
Hmm.
I was told, "Nope, we're not going to have you."
Hmm.
So I basically said, "Okay, now what am I going to do?" I put all my eggs in sort of the coaching basket, GA thing, getting in that angle. So, hey, the Chargers, honestly, with football, I love kicking and playing. But as far as like business side, administration, all that, I always had baseball as something I love to do as well. Hey,
Hmm.
San Diego Padres are here. I'll go apply for a job as an operations assistant here. And that's where that whole started with the next 7, 8 years. And really, I did about 15 years of baseball scouting. So,
Well, it's you don't just go from an entry level position to a scout. You had to have shown some initiative, something. Was there one thing that just kind of propelled you into that line of work that you did for more than a decade?
so small market team, San Diego Padres, small offices, we're all together. The GM's office is right there. He got to know me being around. I
Hmm.
got to do every home game in 94, 95, the radar gun. So I would chart every single pitch and
Hmm.
study the game. My first ever game was 94. The Braves were in town. Greg Maddux versus Andy Bennis. My first game, opening day.
Wow, that's
So
a good one.
did that. The local area scout, because there's scouts around the country that cover high school and college, he brought me in as an associate. So basically, working for free, like a GA would do, I would help scout. Go check out this high school, Chaz. Go see if there's any prospects you think of. So dumping in the deep end, Bernie, I'm able to kind of learn it, talk to older scouts. I
Hmm.
was sent to scout school as well to learn how to actually do the
Oh, wow.
physical of the reports and how to do
Yeah.
things. There's a scout school.
What years were you with San Diego?
94 through 2000.
Oh, wow. I, as a, in the summer of 96, my now 28-year-old was 6 weeks old when my wife and I were in San Diego for a week. And I always loved to go to stadiums. So we went to the old Jack Murphy Stadium. And I don't know if I have this correct, but was Ricky Henderson with the team in 96? Does that ring a
97.
bell? 97. So I must have missed him by a year. There were a couple of names on the 96 team. But what was just as a side note, thinking about that trip is what business did we have taking a 5, 6 week year old halfway across, all the way across the country for a full week? But one of our highlights was going to see the Padres at old Jack Murphy Stadium.
Yeah, it became Qualcomm with that being there. But yeah. So I wouldn't have been there because when I started, so I did local scouting 96 to 2000. I would take my car as a single guy. I would drive to spring training in Florida. I would cover 4 or 5 teams for spring training, major league teams, including the Braves,
Hmm.
other teams as well. Then I would finish and drive north in my car, living in hotels all the time, covering the Carolina League and the Eastern League. So I work as far north as Portland, Maine,
Oh
and
my
work
God.
around. And when I'm done in August, drive home again. So I was on the road, Eastern Seaboard, for 5 years covering teams in the minor leagues. I lived in the minor leagues basically that
How
time.
many miles a year did you average on that car?
Well, I went through 2 cars, 2 Ford Contours that they paid for. I mean,
You're probably driving 40, 50,000 miles a year.
yeah,
Wow.
it was the
Wow.
life.
Yeah, as a single guy who loved what he was doing. Guys, I've got Chaz Bolton with us tonight. Chaz was a kicking specialist in the late 80s, early 90s with us. He was a walk-on, he was a teammate, and he's sharing some of his post Vanderbilt career. And that's at the advent of the internet, and not even social media was a thing, barely cell phones, I guess, at the time. I remember the old bag phones, and you plug it into your cigarette lighter in your car, and it was like $3 a minute, and you didn't keep it plugged in. I mean, that's 93, 94, 95 time period. I remember that. Did you have any technology in your car, or were you having to find payphones and phones from a hotel room?
Yeah, we had an MFS card, some little card you dial in to call and check messages.
Uh-huh.
My hotel, particularly during trading deadline time, right? Baseball,
Mhm.
the GM wanted to know where you are. So I may go to a game, come back, and Kevin Towers, who is the GM, would message, "Hey, we're looking at this guy. Oh, your Chaz is in Lynchburg, Virginia. There's a Pirates guy, Aramis Ramirez, we're looking at. What do you think?" So I was always, as
Wow.
scouts, you're always ready to give your opinion on guys and help make decisions, which 90% of the time they never happen, the trades, but you're
Right.
talking all the time. And as the public knows, stuff happens, but there's 500 discussions behind that trade.
Oh, I was going to say 99.9% of it is not going to be the 0.001% that you ultimately can act on. But who do who do you claim to be guys who you discovered or recommended, and then the Padres or what some other team ended up signing and did well for themselves?
So I'll fast forward. I worked for the Royals my last 6 years. It was kind of part-time, but I was doing my own work. I covered in the Midwest. Now I'm here in Indianapolis, so I would cover the Midwest League and the
Mhm.
International League, so minor leagues here. I remember this. My wife isn't here to listen, but I said, "Honey, I've got to go to Clinton, Iowa. I've got to see the Cedar Rapids versus Clinton. Cedar Rapids is the Angels low A affiliate. Clinton
Mhm.
had the Seattle Mariners, and my wife was due with my daughter
Mhm.
any day, a few days now. So it's
Wait,
almost
hold
like
on. How old is she? Your
she's
daughter?
my daughter's now 14.
Okay, I know where you're. Go ahead. I
You
know
know
where.
who I'm talking about.
Yes, I do. Go ahead.
So I go to watch batting practice. I'm like, oh my goodness, there's Mickey Mantle. I
Hmm.
got to see Mike Trout as a 18-year-old kid, and I was like, this is worth every year of being in this. It was just awesome.
Yeah, that's what a career that just sadly hasn't done any postseason. What, one year maybe, if at all. But yeah, I knew that Trout had to be the guy. Dwayne Jones wants to ask, did you ever scout or come across any of the Vandy guys during your years?
Wow. Oh, yes, I did. And again, I wasn't connected with the program with Coach Mewburn much
Mhm.
but I remember as far as major league guys, none, but there were definitely some Vandy guys I saw. I can't remember all the names. They were not studs
I was gonna say maybe they didn't make their way all the way up to the
yeah.
parent clubs.
Wasn't like the local recent guys that Coach Corbin's done. That's a whole nother animal. Last
Well, I was going to say there's so many of those guys. I want to say 16 or 17 of them played in the major leagues this past year,
wow.
which is just phenomenal. And I saw you and I can have an off conversation about Vanderbilt baseball. But Ches, I want to get back a little bit about the Vanderbilt experience. When I finished and graduated in spring of 90, I was mentally, physically, and emotionally just done with the sport. I wasn't mad at the sport. I wasn't mad that I didn't play much. I was just done. So for several years after that, I didn't go to games. I didn't, wasn't gung ho about it. I was out of my system. It took me about a decade to come back into the fold and to start going to games. Did you ever have an experience or a feeling like that that was you were just finished with that phase of your life, you're ready to move on to something else, it wasn't as important as it used to be? Or have you always been part of the sport or had it part of your life?
As Vandy football, yeah. I mean, always part of my life. I came back for the 96 game. Luke Wyatt got me sidelined with, we almost beat Florida that year.
Hmm.
I've always watched it from afar, being San Diego or here. So because of what I said earlier, just the connection I have with that being part of my college experience. So no, I will say with baseball, once I stopped that, I don't really watch anymore. I couldn't tell you lineups and people now. I kind of cut that off because I gave so much to that, and it didn't quite end like I wanted there
Hmm.
10 years ago, I'll say. So
Well, there's something to be said for just closing chapters. And if it just stays out there and it lingers, that's not real healthy. But I get that, whether it was a good experience or not a good experience, there's time when you recognize there's time to move to the next phase. We have athletes, we have guys who've been on the show, and we know in our own lives that never come to the or allow themselves to come to the realization it's time to hang up the cleats. It's out, you're done. Whether you've graduated, run out of eligibility, you get hurt, you retire, whatever your path is, a lot of times we don't have control of it. But you graduated, I graduated. It was time to move to the next, but you did get that next level. You got at least a tryout and did that. I guess the question is, did that tryout kind of close that chapter for you mentally?
absolutely. I mean, you watch NFL games,
Mhm.
kickers are in a way a dime a dozen, a couple bad games, next guy up. So you realize, you know, it's an anomaly to be like a Jim Arnold or something where you're right. So I knew I wasn't good enough. My passion, determination to succeed in whatever I did kind of pushed me far. I think I could do it, but I realized in 93, now I'm done.
Well, I don't know if you have kept up with our current kicker, who I think is either a freshman or a first year, and his nickname is the Brocket Launcher. And he has 5 plus yard field goals this year, which is a Vanderbilt record already. And he's a semifinalist for the Lou Groza Award nationally. So it's incredible what a season he's had and how reliable he's been.
It's amazing with all levels, D1 or NFL, how, oh, 50-yarder. Yeah, that's like a 40-yarder was back in the day when we
Well,
played, right? The whole shifting of kicking thinking, field goal kicking thinking.
Well, that and with every generation, bigger, faster, stronger. When somebody says, "Was the current game look anything like your game back then?" the answer is no. High schools now look like our offenses from back then, and I think that's the natural progression of any sport. But I want to step back for just a second, talk about Chura for just a minute. I love Rob. What maybe you guys don't appreciate now in the current game, and maybe in the last 25 years, is the unique thing about Rob Chura, among many unique things about him. He was a hockey player. He spoke fluent Russian. He's from St. Louis. He's 5'4", I think, but he kicked barefooted. And that's what I want to ask about. Did you know anybody who ever place kicked besides Rob barefooted? And what was your impression when you saw him kicking barefooted?
I scoot around in high school and fun to kick barefoot because of like Rob did, because the tee, not having a tee off the ground, you get that lift. So I did it for a little bit. Oh, the pain. Oh, yeah. So I feel for Rob having to switch over, when that happened and going barefoot. I guess I remember watching his shoe. I was already gone. We went back to the shoe later, I think he said. But
Yeah.
I mean, there were like 5 NFL kickers in the 80s that were barefoot kickers, and then
I
not
remember a
anymore.
couple
So it
of
was
them.
around.
Tony Franklin was one. Russell Ersklaben. I remember a couple.
I could be a kick nerd. Paul McFadden, Mike Lansford, who was a kicker for the Rams, he would kick barefoot field goals, put his shoe on for kickoffs out in LA. So,
Well, Chad, oh, we got Louis Woolridge is with
oh,
us.
Louis,
Yep.
SoCal.
Gary Rogers is here.
Oh, yeah.
Ainsley Battles, Dwayne Jones, a couple other guys have already rolled through. Guys, of course, I've got Chaz Bolton with us. Chaz was a kicking specialist back in the late 80s, early 90s, and was a teammate for a couple of years with me. Charles, I want to talk about being a dad and how I'm sure like my children, any of your stories from way back have been met not only with eye rolls, but now they're probably telling the stories better than you could tell them at this point because they've heard them so much. But were you able to share any of your sports experiences, whether it was as a youth or Vanderbilt or the tryout, that made any impression on any of the sports or things that your kids have done?
My oldest, who's about 6'5", 225, was a lineman, but just didn't like hitting in high school. And he stopped playing. Let's
Mhm.
work on being a kicker, maybe. He didn't want to do it though. So he's just going to be a business guy someday, which is great. He's a great kid, Alex. My youngest plays basketball. And to be transparent, I love basketball growing up as much as anything. Always loved it. But as a 6'3" sort of power forward guy, I was too short for that. I was looked at for Division III out in SoCal and thought of it, but didn't. So my 10-year-old plays it with a passion. I'm in Indiana, right? So who doesn't? So I think it's some of that's rubbed off my 10-year-old son. He's got that drive, that competitiveness, and and like you said earlier, Bernie, with the whole basketball sports thing, he's already looking AAU stuff. There's all this sort of focus. So for me, it's like let's keep it fun while there's pressures you may see as you want to get better. But I think the basketball for him is what drives what I've kind of given to him a little bit. So,
Well, I didn't know if your wife had any sports background or was athletic or just really more from your side for the kids.
well, I jump in. So she played tennis in high school. My mom is the driver of sports. So
That's where I was going next.
yes,
Yep.
she's now 83, lives in La Jolla, still SoCal, right? Big tennis facility, big tennis place to be. It's like Texas football or Florida football,
Right,
in
right,
California
right.
tennis. So she's won 100 gold balls, meaning
It's
when she was
nuts.
a housewife, she took up tennis for fun. She was a
Mhm,
gymnast as a kid, so a great athlete. She took up tennis for fun and just took to it like a duck to water. And
mhm.
so she's won 100 gold balls, which means she's won 100 national tournaments in either singles, doubles, or mixed doubles. She's been ranked #1 in the world along the way. So 30, 35s, 40s, 45s are different flights all the way up to now. She's still playing in her 80s. She was in Florida for a tournament last week. She'll go over to Europe for some kind of like the Ryder Cup, Davis Cup they do, and she's still playing.
How many tennis Hall of Fames is she in? My gosh, that's amazing.
The San Diego and Southern California, she's certainly her area. So
That's incredible. Well, it's one thing to have your father as a former college football player and kicker, but to have your grandmother as such a mega star in her world of tennis, that's incredible for the kids to have that resource for her from her.
she tries to teach and work with them. I quit tennis as a 14-year-old because I couldn't beat my mom. Like, forget this. Big serve and volley, go hard. She could just dink it back and get like,
Right, right, right.
so.
Well, Chaz, I know you've been with Dell Technology for many years now, but here's my question. When you first transitioned away from scouting world into sales and working with Dell, were there any of your sports training, your sports um, experiences, did any of that translate into the world that your professional world?
Absolutely. The first person to hire me for a startup in San Diego, we played pickup basketball together. So he knew my sports background. And it's in sales, and particularly what the role I'm in, I joke, it's kind of like coaching the SEC. I'm at Dell competing against other companies. It's a grind to get that company to spend money with you.
Mhm.
So I lose a lot more than I win. So I remember Coach Brown saying on your show here, conversations about the underdog and how Vandy is and that focus. I think I took that to me and being a competitive person that wants to win, that will not give up. That fit my sales acumen, and I love the win. If you told me, Bernie, take this pencil and sell it, or this widget, I'll push whatever it is. It happened to be technology. I love technology. Obviously, it's a big part of the world we're in.
Mhm.
So, but definitely the sports drive competition drove my sales development.
And I've heard that line of thinking. I've heard obviously the team mentality and working together as a team, and then somebody breaks out as a leader in the group. There's just so many. There's countless examples how sports help train us. Um, Many guys on the show talk about they think that they were chosen for a particular job just because of the fact they played college sports, as opposed to someone they were competing against was not part of a sports program or a team. I mean, it can go on and on and on like that. Um, Chaz, we've got just a couple of more minutes, but I want to ask, and this is always the tough question that I don't even know how to properly ask it, but I'll give it a shot. What kind of impression did your Vanderbilt experience have on you, I guess, over these years? Not just the football part of it, but the whole package of being a Vanderbilt student and now graduate. What kind of impressions has that made on you? Good, bad, indifferent, just whatever it is that you felt or dealt with.
I think prioritize, right? I mean, I think it was Coach Mason said a few years ago, we got to be Harvard during the week and beat Alabama on the weekend. So
Mhm.
it's that taking it all in and maximizing the time we have. So for me, it's about, time maximization, being a father, a husband,
Mhm.
working, juggling things, being able to, like you juggle practice with school and, keeping the grades up and finding a direction in your major. And it's maybe football goes away, your priorities shift. And for me at 55, for a lot of years, all about the work, work, work. I'm not a manager of people directly. I do manage in my role, but I learned like I need that balance. So it's taught me the balance instead of the football and school. Now it's the work and get my son to practice and watch him practice. Right. So
Mhm.
just the management of life, but never giving up, always pushing. If there are hurdles and setbacks, which we know at Vanderbilt football, it's always been a grind to stay there.
Yeah.
That's how I kind of approach it with work, but then enjoy the process,
Mhm.
the path of it, not just, the next thing.
It's so right because if you don't get your priorities in straight when you're playing a sport, when to rest, when to study, when to do your sport, those kind of things, you're going to get lost, you're going to get left behind, and you won't be there very long. And the same is so true with you in your professional life many years later. And it takes that period of transition to getting comfortable. You're no longer, I sometimes I ask the players or the guys on the show, at what point do you stop thinking and just start doing as an athlete? Meaning the game slows down for you, your heart rate slows down, you see the play before it occurs. And the same thing is so true in our professional life. You're not scrambling as much as you used to. I used to call it when I was a young lawyer, practicing with my hair on fire. Well, after a while, I no longer felt that way because everything just kind of slowed down. And I always attribute it, just like you did, back to just figuring out how to do priorities and how to get things done in a timely way. But I think you have to as an athlete in college, regardless of what level you play.
Pull different directions like we are, and maturity too. Like in my world, it's lose fast, win slow. You know where you're okay, we're not going to get this stuff. Where's the hook? So it's, which is a young sales guy, I thought, boss, I lost the deal. Now it's like, okay, well, you lost it. Let's figure out what happened and learn from it versus worrying about a job or something back in the day. So
No, you're so right. Chaz, I can't believe it's already been almost an hour. Hadn't seen each other in over 30 plus years, and this hour has just it's just flown by. You have brought some memories back to me I have not thought about in a long, long time. So thank you for spending some time with us tonight.
thank you so much for having me on this platform. I just love all you guys and think about the team and the history and just keep going. And, in the old way, go doors, I guess we'd say, right? Or anchor down now. So,
That's right. Now it's this.
yeah.
It's anchor down. Chaz, hang on. Let me sign off, but hang on for just a second. Guys, we got a big game this weekend at Baton Rouge. I think LSU is right for the picking. They've lost three in a row. They are wounded. Hopefully Pavia is getting healthy this week. I don't think he's practiced a whole lot. Hopefully, the team as a whole is getting healthy. And then we've got the Orange at prime time, 11 o'clock on Saturday after Thanksgiving. And then on December 8th, we figure out where we're going bowling. Y'all keep coming back each Tuesday. We've got a whole bunch of Commodores. I got some surprises coming up in January and February that I'll make public known in the next couple of weeks. You guys continue. Anchor down.